is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Welcome to UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York. Join us as we delve into the world's most pressing issues and learn how the people inside work toward a better future for everyone around the world.
Next on UN Insider.
United Nations is the most important multilateral organization.
Developing countries call for fairness as delegates gather for the 78th UN General Assembly.
The biggest countries use the power for pressure small countries.
The UN roadmap for making a sustainable fashion industry.
We will actually be reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by 50%.
Could technology be a way out of poverty?
My big vision is to open a fashion and design so that I can be able to teach those girls who don't have money.
And refugees remain a top priority for the UN.
There is always a balance between the impact that a large number of influx of refugees bring to a community and also the opportunity that it creates.
Next.
Rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, that is the theme of the 78th UN General Assembly. Things got underway on September 5th with Dennis Francis of Trinidad and Tobago receiving the gavel and taking the reins as president of the UN General Assembly. We'll hear from him in a few moments. There is a lot at stake during this session. This is a critical year for the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, and next week's SDG Summit is expected to be a highlight of the gathering. Another highlight, general debate, which will include addresses from leaders and diplomats hailing from around the globe, from small island nations to developing countries and the world's largest economies. And we're keeping an eye on the Chinese delegation. We expect to hear more about China's push toward carbon neutrality, as well as how the Belt and Road Initiative, now in its 10th year, is providing sustainable development opportunities. Let's start with CGTN's Xu Dejia, who is monitoring all the action. Dejia.
Yes, Elaine, as reported in the UN, this week we have already felt the heat of the high-level week. Briefings, events, press conferences, it's difficult for us to keep an eye on everything. And next week, the high-level week, obviously, there will be many summits on various issues. High-level political forum on sustainable development, high-level dialogue on financing for development, high-level meeting on pandemic prevention, preparedness, and response, climate ambition summit, etc. Not to mention, starting from Tuesday, the general debate, where over 100 world leaders, including Ukrainian President Zelensky in person, will share their thoughts on the state of our world. But for the UN, President of the General Assembly and the Secretary General are two most important people. And this week, I got the chance to sit down with President of the General Assembly of the 78th session, Mr. Dennis Francis, to talk about priorities of his presidency. Take a listen. You assume President of General Assembly during a very critical time. We have challenges in multiple fronts. We have the challenges of security and peace. We have the challenges in climate crisis, as well as elimination of poverty. So what do you think is your priority during your presidency?
There's absolutely no doubt that there are several challenges out there. You're quite right, peace and security. There's a climate crisis, there's a global food crisis, and there's poverty and hunger. There's also a major deficit in development. And that is going to be one of the top priorities of this presidency. As you know, the Secretary General will be convening the SDG Summit next week with a view to having heads of state and government recommit to the SDGs and to make hopefully bold contributions towards getting the SDGs back on track. There are too many people across the globe who are suffering and who need the help, the urgent help of the United Nations and of the General Assembly. And that is certainly going to figure as one of the more prominent priorities under my presidency. But, you know, I hesitate in a way to speak of priorities because there are lots of challenges out there. Peace and security is a challenge in various parts of the world. Human rights is a challenge in various parts of the world. Gender equality is a challenge in various parts of the world. What the presidency will therefore be working on is a broad agenda of issues that are in urgent need of being addressed and that will require the contribution, the support, and the collaboration of all members of the international community in order to find workable solutions to these problems.
Also, this week, when answering my question, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, shared his thought on his most important objective in the coming week. What positive note do you expect for the coming weeks with world leaders gathering here? Thank you.
Next week, there will be an important breakthrough in creating the conditions to rescue the Sustainable Development Goals. I'm very hopeful that the SDG Summit will indeed represent a quantum leap in the response to the dramatic failures that we have witnessed until now in relation to the implementation of the SDGs. That would be my most important objective in relation to the next week here in New York.
It's worth noting that among the 5 most important countries, the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, P5, only one head of state will be here next week, which is President Biden of the United States. How would that affect the significance of this year's UNGA? We will have to see. So that's just the tip of the iceberg. For sure, we will have more in the coming week. Elaine.
CGTN's Shudaja, thanks. China is a founding member of the United Nations and has been an important voice in the organization for decades. CGTN's Nathan King takes a look at China's role at the UN and what we can expect during the General Assembly.
The People's Republic of China has been a member of the United Nations and a permanent member of the UN Security Council for over 50 years, as some of its contributions are well known. China is the largest contributor to the United Nations peacekeeping among the 5 permanent members of the Security Council, the second largest contributor to the regular UN budget, and holds an increasing number of leadership positions in United Nations management and the agencies. Over the last few years, China has utilized its increasing diplomatic heft to support the central role of the United Nations in the international system. 2 years ago, President Xi Jinping used his address to the United Nations General Assembly to launch the Global Development Initiative.
The Chinese people have always celebrated and striven to pursue the vision of peace and harmony. China has never and will never invade or bully others or seek hegemony.
The GDI aims to focus global attention on efforts to achieve the UN Sustainable Development Goals for 2030, an ambitious agenda for more equitable global development. More than 100 nations have backed this initiative, with over 60 formally joining a group of friends of the GDI based at the UN. Last year, China also launched the Global Security Initiative at the Boao Forum, a new vision of security for the planet that moves away from confrontation to one of partnership, resolving conflicts through negotiation and consultation, revolving around the concept of indivisible security.
We need to implement the GSI to uphold the vision of common, comprehensive, cooperative, and sustainable security, reject taking sides, block confrontation, and a new Cold War, and address differences and disputes through peaceful means to jointly uphold world peace and tranquility.
China has also been working to increase multilateralism, whether through supporting the expansion of the BRICS grouping at the recent South Africa summit and the expansion of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, helping magnify the voices of the Global South, often among the most ignored members of the United Nations. China has also increasingly spoken out against so-called minilateralism, such as the Quad grouping of the US, Japan, Australia and India, or the Narrow Security Pact dubbed AUKUS, which will spread nuclear submarine technology among the preferred partners of the US, Australia and the United Kingdom. Hopes are that China, by supporting these new global initiatives and the United Nations system itself, that it can help the world heal from the divisions of the COVID-19 pandemic and those by the conflict over Ukraine. It's only when the world can come together and avoid being divided by the crises of today that it can start to address the common challenges of tomorrow, like climate change, artificial intelligence, and sustainable development. Nathan King, CGTN, Washington.
We caught up with the man who leads China's mission to the UN. Ambassador Zhang Jun shares his thoughts on the new General Assembly session.
I wish to extend my warmest congratulations on the premiere of UN Insider. I'm sure this program will open up a new window for the audience to learn more about the United Nations, about multilateral diplomacy, and about China's role on the international stage, as well as its positions and contributions. As President Xi pointed out, building a community with a shared future for mankind requires a strong United Nations, which is the centerpiece of the international system. As we speak, major changes unseen in a century are unfolding at a faster pace, leading to both transformation and upheaval in today's international landscape. In such a context, the UN is taking a more unique and important role, and there are many voices urging the organization to do more. The United Nations is now standing at a historical crossroads, and the people everywhere are pondering the direction of its future development. For the UN to progress, I believe it's important to get the following things straight. First is the right direction, which is the most fundamental issue. What is the right direction? The answer is to build a community with a shared future by upholding common security, promoting common development, and strengthening exchanges and mutual learning between civilizations. Second is the need for solidarity and cooperation. We can get things done only when we stand together. We must say no to bloc confrontation, say no to power politics, say no to double standards, and say no to any acts that undermine solidarity and trust. Third is the importance of being action-oriented. To deal with various global challenges, we cannot just talk the talk. That's by no means enough. More importantly, we should walk the walk and seek real results through concrete actions. In all the three aspects mentioned, we can proudly say that China has been a leader, a pace-setter, and a role model. We have received high praise from the international community for our contributions. As Secretary General Guterres said, China is a central pillar of multilateralism. Moving forward, China will continue to play its role as a responsible major country, practice true multilateralism, and firmly support the central role of the United Nations in international affairs. We will join hands with all countries to make unremitting efforts for our shared future.
Coming up.
If not now, we really lose the opportunity that we have for future generations. So this is the time.
UN Insider.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global Business.
The United Nations is calling on the fashion industry to become more sustainable. It's challenging industry insiders to shift the way they communicate with consumers. The goal to guide shoppers away from overconsumption and toward more sustainable style options. Karina Mitchell spoke with some of the key changemakers involved in this groundbreaking initiative.
According to a new United Nations publication, the global fashion industry is directly contributing to a trifecta of environmental crises: climate change, pollution, and nature and biodiversity loss.
It actually is responsible from between 2 and 8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And the textile processes consume around the equivalent of 86 million swimming pools per year of natural water.
Through creation of the recently launched Sustainable Fashion Communications Playbook, the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, and the United Nations Environment Program seek to fundamentally shift current fashion messaging away from a linear approach to one that embraces circularity.
It's one of the first documents that I've seen a very thorough discussion into the role that fashion plays, not only in decarbonizing our materials, our supply chains, our entire industry, but also as an opportunity to connect with consumers.
Primarily aimed at style marketers, brand managers, media, and storytellers, its aim is fourfold: to introduce new messaging countering misinformation and greenwashing, reduce overconsumption, promote more sustainable lifestyles, and empower consumers to demand more action from businesses as well as policymakers. Tanda says a shift in consumer behavior could prove transformative.
If we would transform our economy into a more circular one, and if we would have products staying in the economy and being used double the time, we will actually be reducing the greenhouse gas emissions by 50%.
Though the fashion industry has long been called out for its role in promoting overconsumption, one expert believes the timing is right for change.
Today, we see that there's so much practical guidance and research to support the industry making the move forward. And if not now, we really lose the opportunity that we have for future generations. So this is the time.
Karina Mitchell, CGTN, New York.
The UN General Assembly is one of the most action-packed events on the calendar as world leaders converge on Midtown Manhattan. We caught up with Bolivia's UN Ambassador Diego Pari. He's also Vice President of the UN Economic and Social Council. He shares why UNGA is so important and what he expects from this year's session. Ambassador Pari, give us some insight into the importance of the United Nations General Assembly.
United Nations is the most important multilateral organization. It was created by humanity after the Second World War, but not all countries have the same treatment. I think the smallest countries have more problems than biggest countries, because the biggest countries use the power for pressure small countries sometimes. But General Assembly is the unique space for say our position, for say our words, and for express our things, our problems, our necessities.
Rebuilding trust and reigniting global solidarity, and taking swift action when it comes to certain goals: peace, prosperity, progress, and sustainability. What does this say about our current world, and how will Bolivia play a part in it?
Actually, around the world, we have multiple crises, geopolitical crisis, we have climate change crisis, COVID-19 crisis, I think this problem generates more difficulties between small countries and bigger countries. International solidarity is not real. In the United Nations, we need more action, more decisions for the vulnerability sectors. In this sense, I think the peace is only possible with social security, with security for all people. And in this sense, we have to work more for attending necessities of the vulnerable sectors and working with all countries.
Rising temperatures, you mentioned climate change, certainly not helping when it comes to water. Can you give us some examples of what the UN is doing to mitigate this crisis?
Climate change crisis, water crisis, is not one country problem. It's a global problem. The global problems need global solutions. In this sense, I think we have work more. All countries have to work together. All countries we have to look for a solution for these problems. But there are some countries with more responsibilities. Development countries have more responsibilities in climate change, have more contributions for this problem. I think these countries have to contribute more to the solutions too.
Ambassador Pari, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Coming up.
All these factors are combined to create this situation of displacement and migration throughout the continent.
UN Insider.
We are CGTN, China Global Television Network.
The UN budget for peacekeeping is $6.38 billion. 12 is the number of countries with ongoing peace operations. And 34 is the number of UN soldiers killed this year. In 2022, Brazil hosted over 500,000 refugees and asylum seekers, mainly from Venezuela and Haiti. Hundreds of foreigners looking for a new place to call home entered the country every day in 2023. I sat down with David Torzilli, the UNHCR representative to Brazil. He's been working with refugees for almost 30 years around the planet. What are some of the unique challenges that you see in this country?
The challenges that Brazil faces, as many countries in this region and around the world these days, is the number of refugees that are entering the countries. For the past 5-6 years, as you know, Brazil has received almost 500,000 of Venezuelans. But in the past year, Brazil has also been hosting a number of other nationalities. And this year in particular, we are experiencing not only an increase in the arrival of Venezuelans in the past 3-4 months, but also the arrival of Afghans, the arrival of Asians and Cubans, and a number of nationalities from the African continent.
What is bringing this massive influx of migrants to this country? And are you seeing this all around the world?
In the region, of course, the situation, there's a mix of situation of human rights violation, of persecution, gross socioeconomic problems, the impact of climate change and natural disaster. All these factors are combined to create this situation of displacement and migration throughout the continent. And Brazil is a country that, because of its policy, is receiving a high number of refugees.
Where is the balance, or how challenging is it to balance the needs of Brazilians and as well as all the people coming in?
We have conducted a study last year with the World Bank in the Roraima state, which is a state receiving bordering Venezuela and receiving a large number of Venezuelan refugees. And the economic conclusion from this study done with the World Bank is that the refugees present has benefited and created job opportunities, created opportunity also for the local population. So there is always a balance between the impact that, of course, a large number of an influx of refugees brings to a community, and also the opportunity that it creates.
Mr. David Torzilli, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Africa is the least connected region in the world, with over 60% of the population lacking internet access. The United Nations have 17 Sustainable Development Goals, in part to address major development challenges and to achieve peace and prosperity. We visit one village in Kenya where internet access is transforming people's economic outlooks and providing a lifeline out of poverty.
My name is Sherry Nagina. I'm 24 years old. When they were building this school, I just heard from my friend that there is a library in this area, because I used to go down there. It is far from our place, so I decided to come here, which is near. I wanted to study about designs, but there's so many colleges, their fee is more expensive. Based on the situation where I'm living, I couldn't go to university or in college, so I just came here to study in the library. My hobby was reading, so I could just stay at home and read some magazine. Reading that magazine, I came up with the interest of design. I found a teacher who came and asked me if you are interested in tailoring, because it started this year. If you are interested in tailoring and fashion design, I said yes, I'm interested.
Nagana logs on here for free to research designs and find inspiration.
Looking from the picture, I can Google from the internet, and I know how this dress was made, and I can try it out. After I finish designing my clothes, I normally post them on WhatsApp. For example, this one is for a certain man who told me to, so maybe he will wear it, and then I take him a photo the way he has worn it. Or I can take it a photo like that one and put it on WhatsApp. My big vision is to open a fashion and design, which has my last name. At least to open up my own tailoring, even tailoring school, so that I can be able to teach those girls who don't have money or who are idle, so that I can continue teaching them.
Teaching them how to sew, to find a way out of poverty, one stitch at a time. Thanks for being a UN Insider. I'm Elaine Reyes at the United Nations headquarters in New York.
Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy, your money has a story to tell. Because every business story is a human story. Global business. Whether it's about your education, the home you live in, or the items you buy.